You're listening to the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Zach Gelb Show on this Tuesday, 609-919-9200. Time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios is 4:18. We'll put the Sixers talk on the back burner for just a second, as that's going to be the big story throughout the entire week, as the Sixers have the number one pick in this year's NBA draft. It's going to be Ben Simmons, and we'll see if they're able to trade to number 3 to get Chris Dunn. Mickey Moniak was introduced today, gets a $6.1 million signing bonus. Also some interesting rumors surrounding the Mets, and we'll get to the Yankees. And now joining us, he is a baseball insider for NBC Sports Radio, and that is Seth Everett, who joins the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Seth, thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
No problem. You know I'm Jersey, so anytime. We got to hang, dude.
Aren't you a Devils fan? Is that right?
I moved to New Jersey the same day the New Jersey Devils did. That's my story. They are the only professional sports team I tweet about that I'm not working for. And I voted for the team name. The Asbury Park Press, they had a thing where you could fill out the ballot and mail it in. I asked my mom for a stamp and the whole thing, and I voted for the Devils. So I can say the first hockey game I ever saw was a Devils game. And, I've met with the owners, and the organization is in very good hands.
All right, if you believe so. I'm not a big fan of Josh Harris, but, he double dips with both the Sixers and the Devils, and I'm a Rangers fan, so I know that won't please you too well. But I guess we have to come catch a game.
That building was bankrupt. They're not anymore. I mean, that's the first thing. The franchise was in a point where they were literally in trouble. They almost had the league take away the team from the previous owner. So, I understand the basketball strategies of those things, but from a hockey standpoint, with a hard salary cap, the fact that they even compete is interesting.
I think, you're right. He does do a much better job for hockey than compared to the NBA, but I guess we'll have to catch a Rangers-Devil game this year.
Oh, that'll be my pleasure. Yeah, I have been born to hate that other franchise. You're on a station called The Jersey. You have to talk Devils.
Yeah, we have to talk Devils, Rangers, Flyers. That's just the market. I can't really win that much when I talk about sports here when it comes to teams, because when I talk about the Eagles, all the Giants fans get mad. When I talk about the Giants, all the Eagles fans get mad.
Anybody happy, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a melting pot for sports here in Jersey. But let me ask you this. Mickey Moniak gets introduced today, the number 1 overall pick for the Phillies. Do you like that pick by the Phillies?
I lean on – I have a very strict philosophy when it comes to minor league baseball. I don't watch it. And what I believe in is I believe in the folks at MILB.com. I worked with them for a long time, and they have told me that the kid is great stuff. You don't make predictions on young players. He was the right guy at the right time. He has the right tools. I think they'll put him on a fast track through the system. I think it's the right thing, but the one thing I've learned, because I've been bitten before, I've never made assumptions about young athletes. And even when they get to the big leagues, I do not make assumptions and assume that young players get it. That's why. Do you remember in 2003 when Dontrelle Willis burst onto the scene for the Marlins? I was working for the commissioner's office at the time, and they couldn't wait to get a bunch of PR, to promotional stuff around Dontrelle Willis. David Wright warned me about that, young players, and you don't make assumptions about young players. Dontrelle Willis comes out on the scene. Who had egg on their face when he got DUI for peeing in a parking lot? It's the thing that you don't automatically assume, and whenever it comes to the draft, because I've hosted the draft for 5 years, the one thing you assume is you'd never make assumptions.
Well, God bless you, because that's definitely something tough to host as the draft. It's so tough to really know what these guys are, and we probably won't see Moniak for quite some time.
Right,
but
it's going to be at least two, probably 4.
So the people you talk to, who do they compare him to?
It's not Clayton Kershaw. You know what I mean?
As we're talking to Seth Everett, who joins us right now, baseball insider for NBC Sports Radio. So really with the Phillies right now, J.P. Crawford hasn't hit that well in the minors. Nick Williams has been hitting really well. For those two guys, what do you know about them? And I would assume that we see Williams sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's talk about the arbitration clock, and, one thing I can tell you from studying that is the arbitration clock is something that You have to understand that it keeps a guy in the organization longer. That's the one thing that I understand the Phillies are deciding on whether or not to start these guys. Because remember, once you make your big league debut, your clock starts. And that can signify the end of a tenure. I like what the Phillies have put together. I think the biggest misgiving that the Phillies made, and last time I covered the Phillies, they were fantastic, was in 2011. The one thing that I will say about the Phillies from here on out is that they took too long a time to acknowledge that there was a rebuild. Now the rebuild is here. They've hit a rough patch. This is a rough patch, but to sit here and jump off a bandwagon when you had all that good vibe coming from an organization because they've lost 9 of 10, I don't think that's appropriate.
A lot of times people make too much of the hitting coach. Right now, Tommy Joseph has not been playing that great recently, although I will say I am a fan of Tommy Joseph. I do think that he'll do well for this Phillies franchise, and it's just an adjustment, but he did get off to a good start with the Phillies. Maikel Franco is also in a slump. What can a hitting coach do to get those two young guys out of a slump? Because their confidence must not be great right now.
No, and a lot of times it's just confidence. The one thing that I have a general rule. I don't put a lot of stock in hitting coaches, especially at the major league level. There's a couple of things they can look at. There's a lot more video now than there ever has been. But the reality of it is hitting coaches, to me, never get the credit. I don't give them the credit when the team hits, and I don't give them the blame when they don't. It's one of those things where most times your manager is the guy that really is the one that can give the most confidence because that's the guy that fills out the lineup card. But I think that, from what I've seen from the Phillies, they've had offense in spurts. I saw one game in person. I was down there, and they scored 6 runs in the first 2 innings. Then there was 2 other games where they were literally losing 3-1 up until the 8th inning. It's just an inconsistent team. That's what happens when you're young.
Let's get to the starting pitching, and like you're saying, you're going to see ups and downs with these young players. Aaron Nola is that big-time pitcher for this Phillies team. Hasn't been great the last 2 starts, had 2 concise starts back-to-back. Do you expect him to bounce back tonight versus the Twinks?
Well, the Twins stink, so hopefully.
The Yankees beat them up pretty well, winning 3 out of 4, so that shows you how bad the Twins are.
They're not very good. It's funny how there's a dichotomy in baseball. One of my biggest arguments that I make is that, I want the NBA to have the competitive balance that baseball has. Baseball has right now 14 to 16 teams that are literally showing up at the ballpark today thinking they have a legitimate chance at the World Series. And that's not an exaggeration. There are 14 teams that think they have a shot at the World Series right now. There are 4 in the National Basketball Association. That means there are 10 other good teams that are no-hopers. Whereas in baseball, it's amazing. And I'm not putting the Phillies on this list. There really are only a handful of really bad teams. The Angels are bad. The Astros have much improved. The Twins stink. The Braves stink. That's pretty good considering the fact that for the amount of good teams there are in baseball, there aren't as many bad teams.
All right, let's get to the Mets. They get d'Arnaud back tonight. He's going to hit 8th in that lineup. And I'll say this about the Mets. I watched that game Saturday night, and it was just abysmal. I don't like to rip Terry Collins and Tim Tuffle that much, but some bad decisions by them in the 9th to send Flores and then also not to send Diaza on that stolen base opportunity when they were giving him second base. The big rumor now with the Mets, and it's out there that Jose Reyes wants to return. Will there be a reunion with the Mets and Jose Reyes?
Oh, I don't think so. I would be surprised. The Mets are so PR conscious. I mean, take this from a guy who's worked for that organization. They are afraid of every perception that they get. Considering the fact that, Reyes kind of left them and the way he left them, and then the fact that he lost his starting job because of a domestic violence charge. I can't see the Mets going out and signing him. I don't think it would be a bad idea. There's clearly an offense that doesn't have a lot going for it.
They stink.
And just try a bunch of combinations. Who knows? Maybe he can spark something. It's just amazing to see Jose Reyes. I remember when the biggest thing that you criticized Reyes for was grinning all the time. He was always smiling. And I always remembered that. It's just amazing. I talked to David Wright a couple of days ago, and just the idea of maybe coming home would be a good reclamation project. I don't see it happening very quickly. I just don't see you put a player like that right in the middle of a pennant race and keep your fingers crossed. If the team was struggling, I could see that being a better move for him than going into, right in the heart of a race, if you believe that the Mets are in a race.
Obviously, David Wright disappointed because of the injury right now, and he got surgery on that. How were his spirits when you talked to him?
He's frustrated, man. He's very frustrated. I think that it's been tough for him. Spinal stenosis and now a bulging disc in his neck. That's one of those things where, people wonder what it's like when you get older. And it's funny how, baseball, you say 35, you're over the hill. I mean, David Wright looks like a young man. He looks like the same guy. He's in impeccable shape, and he can't stay healthy. And it's very frustrating to not be on a competitive team. The one salvation for David Wright is that he sees that the organization is on the right path. And you can debate whether or not they're going to have a 2016 like they had 2015, but there was a great amount of satisfaction for David Wright because don't forget, when he came to the ball club, they were on the heels of the 2000 team, and they were basking in the glow of that, and it's been a long time to get back.
Now, the Mets have to find a way to replace David Wright. You don't think it's going to be Jose Reyes. What would it take to get a Danny Valencia? Do you think the Mets could possibly make a move for Danny Valencia?
Yeah, I mean, Rafael Montero. I mean, that's pretty much what it would take. And I don't know necessarily that that they're pulling that kind of a move off. I like the idea of Neil Walker moving to third and Dilson Herrera coming up. I'd sink or swim with Dilson Herrera. I happen to think the guy's got a ton of talent. It was funny. I remember in 2014 when I traveled with the Mets, they were doing infield drills, and Daniel Murphy was standing next to Dilson Herrera, and it almost looked like one of the stadium workers was with a slick fielding player. Like, it was amazing to me, the difference. Dilson Herrera just has baseball instincts. And, yes, he's got a lot to learn, and I don't know necessarily that he's a major leaguer, but I like that idea rather than giving up one of the pitchers.
Also, you have Cespedes' friend, and I know the Mets aren't going to go out there and spend that much money.
Yeah.
How about the Cuban players? Is there any legs to that possibly?
Well, it's something they're kicking the tires on. There's a lot of people that want to see. The problem is you don't know exactly what his age is, and a lot of people have said that he's dropped off a notch. That, if this was 4 years ago, that it would be great, but the problem is, the relations between the United States and Cuba were very, very different at the time. So I wouldn't do it because Cespedes says so. This is the other guy who, tried to convince his teammates to buy a pig. So I don't necessarily put all my stock in his basket, but I do like the idea, and I understand the idea of trying to inquire because they could use offensive help. Their team. There's not a Cespedes out there. There's not the kind of move that's going to come in and have the same spark as last year. And, I made the comment on NBC Sports, and I'll stand by it. I do think that 4 of the 6 divisions are decided already at Major League Baseball. I mean, I don't think the Dodgers catch the Giants. I don't think anybody's catching the Cubs. I don't think anybody's catching the Nationals for that matter. And I don't think anybody's catching the Texas Rangers. Granted, the Central and the East are wide open in the American League, but outside of that, you're talking about wild cards. And I don't trade starting pitchers for wild cards. I also was the same guy who said that the Mets should have traded Matt Harvey last winter, but that's another story.
Well, you never know. They may end up trading him next winter, and we'll wait to see with that as we're talking to Seth Everett, baseball insider for NBC Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, The Jersey. One more Mets question for you before we get to the Yankees. When Wheeler comes back, do you see them go into that 6-man rotation, or does Cologne go to the pen?
Ooh. Let's cross that bridge. I mean, I know he's going to the doctor, and he's going to see a lot of. It's not necessarily a setback, but Tommy John surgery is not, it's not a biceps injury. It's a major injury, and what happens, with him is you just want to wait your time. I would give him extra rehab starts. I wouldn't necessarily just thrust him right back in the rotation. I would ease him into it. I could see him going to the bullpen and throwing on somewhat of a routine. I don't think it's an automatic that they do. I just know that they love, again, this is the Mets, They love PR. They love the PR that Cologne brings them. It's a showcase. It's cute. You know, the Topps does those 24-hour baseball cards and they've done 2 with Bartolo Colon. They're the 2 highest sellers. Something to all that, and unfortunately, that's what you see.
A few more minutes with Seth Everett, who joins us right now. Let's get to the Yankees. Hey, I don't think they're that good of a baseball team. I know you don't either this year. I don't see them ever catching the Jays, Red Sox, or Orioles this year, or even making it even close in that AL East. You have Beltran and the 3 arms. What do you look for the Yankees to do at that trade deadline? You would assume they trade Carlos Beltran, but what of the 3 arms do you think is most likely to leave the Yankees?
Well, here's the thing. I understand the argument to keep them. I understand it.
So do I.
I disagree with it, but they're 4 out of the wild card. And you're a game under 500, 4 out of the wild card. That's a legitimate that's enough to say you have a meaningful summer ahead of you. I would trade Andrew Miller to the Cubs. You can pillage them. I mean, they are stacked in their minor league system. I talked to a guy from MILB.com. That's, again, I don't watch minor league baseball, but they said that the Cubs still have one of the top 5 farm systems. Get 2 of their prospects. Give them Andrew Miller. What's the difference? You need to stockpile. There is no prospect in the Yankee system that is a can't-miss right now. And because of that, they need to make a deal like R.A. Dickey to the Blue Jays. Get a starting pitcher and a catcher. And sure, you don't know 100% on the catcher, even though I really like him. You don't know, but you have to go out and be aggressive. The other guy that you could trade is Chapman. There's no love lost between the Yankees and Chapman. You have to look at it as a real estate transaction. They were given Chapman. Brian Cashman told me when they made the deal, because a lot of people said, well, wait a minute, why are the Yankees, and I criticized the Yankees. I didn't like the idea that the deal was no good for the Dodgers, but okay for the Yankees. I just didn't think that was a very Yankee-like thing to do. But the argument was you have to look at it as a commodity. They were able to get Chapman for half of what the Dodgers were going to give up. Well, if Chapman continues to pitch well, and I know he had a hiccup over the weekend, but if he pitches well, you can now trade him to a pennant race, because in the heat of a pennant race, you're not going to care. And you can now turn Chapman into a better upgrade for your farm system than what you gave up to get him. That's the argument to trade Chapman.
Before we let you run, I was disappointed that the starting pitcher, Strasburg, got stretched last night, as I'm sure everyone was.
But it helped me because it helped me go to sleep.
Yeah, which is always a good thing, because I know that you sometimes don't get a lot of sleep. But Kershaw right now, he's the MVP of the NL, 11-1, 157 ERA, 141 strikeouts. It's like I'm watching a video game. The guy gets better each and every year, and the things he do, it doesn't make sense for a starting pitcher to be able to pitch to what he's doing right now.
Yeah, he's the MVP of the Dodgers, but he's not the MVP of the league.
All right, so who is?
Well, let me look, because Harper's been down. Let me get back to you on that. But I don't. As a general rule, I don't give it to pitchers. The pitchers have their award. Let them have their award. They can do that. And I'm diametrically opposed to. I just think there isn't a first baseman award, but there is a pitching award. Give the pitcher the pitching award and let the first baseman compete for MVP.
Once again, Seth Everett, baseball insider for NBC Sports Radio. Seth, thanks so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
You got it.